Megan, what were some of your initial thoughts on this episode?
My biggest takeaway is that Dukat and Kai Wen should never kiss. Because ew. Oh man. Was that a pile of ew? There was a lot of, this was a romantic episode where all of the romance was either thwarted or horrifying in some way. I thought it was really, we had our kind of our main plot points going on, are Dukat getting ready and then proceeding with his infiltration of DS9 and his plot to convert Kai Wen. We have Damar taking over now as the official firm leader of the Cardassians and his interplay with Weyoun, which is very interesting. We've got Ezri and Worf, who are dealing with the fallout, given equal emotional weight of being captured by the Breen and also having just ill-advisedly hooking up. Looking for that. And of course, then there is Sisko and Cassidy dealing with the fallout of the prophecy from Sisko's mother, the prophets, about whether or not they should marry. So lots was going on. I thought just all of the different kinds of relationships and coming together and splitting apart was really interesting. And it felt like a transitional episode. A lot of plot points that were opened up in the last one that we saw. And then to be kind of not quite concluded, but really the points I think are all nailed home in the next episode. But this was the big setup. What did you each think of it, Murphy?
Yeah, it's a fun episode. We're going to be dealing with one long episode for the next several. So it's, as much as DS9 is pretty serialized, this end game is basically just one long chunk. There's some interesting points. Worf and Ezri getting tortured by the Breen, I think them speculating. There's a neat little moment that I got hung up on as a fanboy. Worf says something like, no one's ever seen a Breen before and lived to tell the tale. Well, it's not exactly true, because Dukat and Kira killed a bunch and when they rescued Zial. And it's also funny that Breen's supposed to be super cold, and they say it's not. And these guys are working in the desert. I like that. But yeah, so you could ask Kira. She knows what Breen looks like. You'd have to find out where Dukat's hiding to ask him. But yeah, I'm sure Zial did as well. It's a strangely paced episode. And yeah, the relationship filler stuff in this is really kind of ick. I'm a little happy for Kai Wen. A lifetime of misery, and you finally get to just spend a few days in bed with someone eating grapes. I'm happy for, even if it is completely false. It's a bummer. I feel bad for her. And Worf and Ezri just, yeah, you can see what a bad idea it is.
As we all know, I'm a little bit older than you all. And there was a movie in the late 60s called Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex, but Were Afraid to Ask. It was based on a book of the same title. And it was prescient for the 60s. Mm-hmm. At any rate, in the movie, Gene Wilder has sex with a sheep. And after they have sex and they're in bed together, the sheep is smoking a cigarette. And the only thing missing from the Kai Wen and Dukat scene was Kai Wen smoking a cigarette with the ashtray on Dukat's chest.
Yeah.
I was so disgusted by that. I just can't imagine a male, not that we haven't taken one for the team before, but Jesus, having to sleep with Kai Wen.
I think she's a fine-looking woman, but her personality is repellent.
Yes to all the above. But then I did a little research, and the writers actually perversely like this because they wanted to put two evil people together somehow. And I thought about it, and they did. Just that in bed, I was like, why didn't somebody smoking a cigarette in the ashtray on the other person's chest? That's all we need. The Ezri Worf stuff, Megan, in our last episode, you sort of hinted that we'd all been 21 once and perhaps made mistakes. That's what I thought I was seeing, except two high schoolers talking about, oh, did we do that? Oh, we didn't do that. Oh,
it's so true.
And I just thought it was like two kids having it out. Oh, you said you love me. Oh, you rat, you big meanie.
I'm no prude, but if you're not old enough to have a conversation about how you feel about it, you shouldn't do it.
So
that's kind of it, right? Ezri's too young and Worf's just a big baby. There's two horrible
Softy.
people. Yeah.
Spiritual for him.
He's a big toddler.
He's a big baby, but
Yeah,
he has a big heart.
he does.
And then
Presumably among other things.
the Cisco Cassidy, I actually enjoyed the struggle Cisco had here. And I enjoyed the fact he talked to Kira about it. And they discussed, did he have to follow the path set forth for him? Could he go against them? Was this simply a warning not to go down this path? It was not a command not to. He said you should not, but and it was really interesting, that struggle he had until he, of course, as all males do, fall on our knees and press undying love when we're about to lose the best thing that ever happened to us. It was an interesting arc for me. I was also interested in the scene where Kai Wen, for the first time, probably in the entire series of DS9, became vaguely self-aware. And that was after she had the vision from the pirates. And she was self-aware of her own failings. She shared those with Kira.
That's the next episode, isn't it?
Is it?
I'm not sure. Might be this one. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's the next one.
It was after the pillow talk.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. The other one, the character whose name I can't remember, but it's essentially her manservant, or man in waiting. He is clearly disgusted by all this, and he is 100% loyal to Kai Wen. And he has followed her, he has indulged her, he has met her every whim as he sees his service. And there's certainly characters like that in history, and it's a well-known trope, and he is there to serve her in every way. And not only does he feel betrayed by her, but he sees the danger in all this in a way she can't. So I was very interested, and they disclothe him, if that's a word, not naked, but they take him out of his robe, and they show, which allows to show his greater facial expressions and how much he disapproves of all of this. A lot going on there. This episode was directed, I believe, by Renee, and I know you can pronounce this better than I can, Murphy. Azerbaijan? That's wrong.
Renee Auberginois, yeah.
Oben, yes, him.
Yeah.
Odo.
Yes.
And he has a very little role in this, except in a brief scene, a vision scene. It's his last episode to direct, so I was a little bit interested in this. The other thing was, as we have talked about in the episodes leading to this and in this episode, we're in the final arc, and the writers understand that, and they are trying to write. Essentially, 4 writers were writing 4 stories, except it was one, and so they had to collaborate in a way that they typically wouldn't. They would collaborate together on a story, but this was over 4, so their writing process, and I think we'll talk about the writing as we move towards the end. It gets sharper and it gets better, and they are on their A game. And the next episode, I really want to highlight the writing as something that was really good in this episode. We take a few more steps down the path that he's heading, and that being sold out by way. I had misremembered what was the breaking point a little bit, and we'll get to that in the next episode. But I thought it happened in this episode, in the scene where he was asked to sign the treaty, where Cardassia made concessions, but he didn't know what they were. Yeah. And then Wayun said, there'll be plenty of territory. I thought he was going to then find out he had given away Cardassia Prime, the Breen, and they were going to allow the Cardassians to move into Earth or somewhere else in the solar system after the war. The Founder continues to slide downhill. Kudos to our biological warfare unit in the Federation for their great work and our ethics there. I really liked, you're right, Megan, this was multiple strands going on, but what I saw, and I really saw it in the next episode, was it focused me to where, okay, we're in endgame.
Yeah.
And frankly, at the end of the next episode, that's when I thought, this is it. okay, let's rock now. You're right. In many ways, a transitional episode, but a transition which let us see some characters, particularly Kai Wen, in a very different way, and thinking how differently it could have gone if she had taken Kira's advice. But that was not to be.
Yeah.
I thought there was something really interesting, and I was thinking about this a little bit, particularly with Dukat in the Bajoran disguise. He had really amazing insight into what exactly would make Kai Wen first fall for him and then eventually take whatever next steps are coming. But I had one thing down here when he's talking to her about Sisko and this kind of ongoing rivalry that she's had with him, largely unspoken. How can he help to heal what he can never comprehend? And I'm wondering how much of this kind of emotional intelligence is from Dukat and how much is from the Paul Wraiths. Because I found it was, for me, a little hard to credit that Dukat would have such a nuanced take on the Bajoran experience to be able to perform so well in his various roles in the episode. What did you think of that?
Isn't that amazing, though? Sisko is essentially cut off from Bajor, right? He's revered by the Bajorans. He's been on Bajor for, 5 years now, 7 years. But Dukat's experience as the prefect of Bajor for almost 20 years, the last 20 or so years of the occupation, allows him to understand the Bajoran mindset to such a greater and deeper degree than Sisko will ever be able to. That's bone chilling. There's some really, it really is, and there's some really interesting moments. One of the moments I really like with Dukat in this episode is that he goes to visit Damar on Cardassia, and he sees how far Damar is falling. He sees that he's just lying in bed all day drinking Canar, and he basically gives him that 30-second little pep talk where he's just like, you have to get back to the person I knew you were. You have to be that selflessly brave guy who took on the entire Klingon Empire with me underground for a year. This is not you. You're better than this. You have to find yourself again. And it's so touching, considering the legacy of what the two of them went through. Damar killing Zial, Dukat losing his mind. This whole, I love that scene. You also got to wonder, too, and I was thinking about this with Kai Wen, how long do Kai Wen... The episode doesn't really sync up in terms of time. We never really get a firm understanding of how long Wen and Dukat are on the station. It seems short, but they could have just been there for weeks. Similar with Odo and the Founder when they're just locked in that room. It seems like they're there for a long time. A lot of things happen in those little conversations between them that seems to stretch out the period of time that they're spent there, which I find odd. Nobody on Bajor is like, where is the Kai for weeks at a time? And nobody on the station, that guy really looks like Dukat, who's just kind of wandering around. It seems a little weird, but that scene with him and Damar, I love that. It's so good. Anyway.
Let me pick up on both of those, because Murphy answered the question you posed, Megan, in a way that I was leaning as well, except that I despise Gul Dukat. Either that or I think he's one of the most invidious villains there is, because there's no depth that he won't sink to. And I thought that was the depth he would sink to. He was drawing upon his personal knowledge of the Cardassian experience as their overseer and overlord and causer of their pain and anguish. And I almost thought, oh my God, he's going to break character and he's going to recognize her, or she's going to recognize him. But of course that didn't happen. But I thought that was him saying, oh, I know. And then on Murphy's point, so years ago I was reading some spy novel, and the two characters went in a Russian concentration camp. And no, they were officers in a concentration camp. And one guy was a drunk and the other guy was trying to run it. And he makes the drunk stand at attention because they were both officers. And he looks at him and he says, you are an officer in the Soviet army. You will conduct yourself as an officer. And that's what I heard in that talk. You were an officer in my army. Yeah. And you will conduct. Now, he was a great officer and near the top. And whether Dukat could have done what he did without Damar, open question. But you're absolutely right. He called upon that Damar to come back. Yeah. And we begin to see that. So you're absolutely spot on. The other thing I wanted to bring up was when Quark brought the ring in. I think I'm getting both these episodes are conflating. So I hope this isn't the next one.
This
It is
is this
Stop
one.
Me.
Yeah,
It's this one or the next one?
it's this one.
Okay. Quark has done something magnificent to get a fabulous ring for Sisko to put on Cassidy's finger. And it's glorious. And even Quark acknowledges how beautiful it is. Of course, he has to say, no refunds, Captain, because he's Quark. But then as he sort of turns to leave, he looks back to Sisko and says, really would be a shame to waste. Yes. That's how deep Quark is, because he knows the anguish Sisko's going through, even if he's viewing this as a very significant transaction for him. So I loved that whole interplay, because I've been focusing on Quark so much and seeing the growth in Quark. And that was for me one more of those sort of growth steps.
Yeah. You got to keep in mind, too, Quark has had his heart broken more than a few times in the series. And we see the levels that he's willing to go to pursue sort of love. He does that with that Cardassian professor that comes to the station. He helps her escape from the Obsidian Order, and then he falls in love with Grilka, that Klingon woman, and they get married. We've talked about this before. There's a profound loneliness in Quark. And I think deep down, he's looking for lack of a better word, human connection. It doesn't come up because he has conflicting values about what it means to be a Ferengi and what it means to be a businessman or someone with a family or someone with love. But when the Nagus is in trouble, you help your Nagus. That's part of his heart. He just believes it. When his mom is kidnapped, he rounds people up and he goes and saves her. I think that love, that heart, as you say, it's a big part of Quark. It's neat to see the way it changes. Even in his relationship with Odo, which is so antagonistic, and they basically just love each other in a really weird, dark way.
I think it's something I really like about Quark's characters. He's got these, maybe because he's spent so much time around humans, but he's got these human sentiments and this human value system that he can only express in Ferengi terms. And every time it happens, I think that the ring is a perfect example of this. It was very expensive. These were hard to get because it's a war on. No refunds. Shame to waste. That's him saying, come on, man, go get your girl. Most Ferengi way possible. I think it's just so charming. And he does it again and again. He expresses these really lovely, warm sentiments in cold Ferengi language.
Yeah.
You want to do a lightning round on whether this episode works for you or not?
Yeah, last little round. Cassidy is an extremely tolerant woman. I think Sisko was very lucky that she said yes after he did the turnaround. I like the episode. I like it particularly as a pair with the next one, because the next one is, I think, where a lot of stuff comes together, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Cassidy and Sisko breaking each other's hearts a couple times over the series. She becomes a criminal, and he has to send her to jail, and then he breaks off the wedding.
They thought that was hot.
Yeah, they have a weird relationship. So what were we talking about? She's a space trucker, and he's kind of a man god. So there's going to be some difficulties in the relationship. You've got to work it out.
That's the banner for the episode. Weird relationships.
Weird relationships, yes. From everybody. Weird relationships between Dukat and Damar, between Ezri and Worf, Wayun and Damar, Dukat and Wen. It goes on and on.
I, for one, hope I never see Kai Wen in bed with another species again, and I'll just leave it at that. But as we begin to see these storylines coalesce around each other and separately, I was excited for that, because they do seem disparate, but you can see, and we all know how this ends, but we can see how they're narrowing down to really, and I remember this series in real time, and each week was just, we couldn't wait for the series. And this was early days, maybe not early days, but like AOL had these huge chat boards that were dedicated to each issue, and I was dedicated to all of those chat boards. We were down to naming the warships that died, went completely into it. And then people were pretty good about putting spoiler alerts. So if you hadn't seen it, you didn't watch it. But I just remember the excitement that I and all of us felt. So
that countdown was epic. I was in my last year of high school when this countdown happened. And my best friend and I were Trek nerds. We spent all day, every day, talking about Star Trek in one way or another. And when those last few episodes hit, we were just so on board. I remember that. And seeing the little teaser at the end of each episode as it just counted down to the last, it was something weirdly epic for us.
That was a very different experience for the last year of TNG. It was episodic, and they were telling great stories. And the last season, in my mind, was absolutely the best screenwriting, but it wasn't all tying everything together at the end. So I had a very different feeling about the end of TNG, but I just remember almost frothing for the last episodes of DS9. Couldn't wait for the next week. Megan?
Yeah.
I was just a little bit too young for DS9 when it was airing, so I missed out on it.
All right, guys. I can't wait to see what we come up with next time.
Bye.